Well, first, let me welcome everybody here to the Arsenal. This is our kickoff to our new lecture series called Parks Without Borders Discussion Series. And so we're very delighted that you're here for this inaugural event. We'll be having several discussion series throughout the year. And so we're very excited that we have some out-of-town guests, actually returning guests who used to live here in New York, to share some of their ideas about innovative park system. But before I begin, I first want to give many thanks to the JPB Foundation, including Dawnette Zaninga, who is a former Parkie, for their support for the Parks Without Borders Summit and Discussion Series. We really couldn't have pulled this off without them. So thank you, JPB Foundation, and please give them a round of applause. Before I go into I didn't introduce myself. Some of you may or may not know me. My name is Mitchell Silver, and I'm the Parks Commissioner here in New York City. Today's discussion is being live streamed. So those that could not make it are actually watching it, whether you're in the university, comfort of their home, or anywhere around the world. This video will also be online next week. So you can tell your friends, and hopefully we can get this nice series going on Netflix, on Parks Without Borders. But we want you to also help us create a buzz for these events. So if you're on Twitter or Instagram, whatever you use, it's the hashtag Parks Without Borders, which is right there. And then I would encourage you all to join us for the conversation and then also refreshments after this discussion. So I'd like to introduce this lecture series. Some of you may know we launched a program called Parks Without Borders. It was our goal to create the next generation of ideas for our parks, and it's our goal to create a seamless public realm. Parks are not islands that sit in isolation. They're connected to sidewalks and streets and public spaces. So it's our way of thinking about a seamless public realm for New York City. When we launched the summit in May of last year, again another sold-out crowd, we called it the Parks Without Borders Summit, and it was our goal not just to talk to ourselves, but we really wanted to have a conversation about the next generation of parks and public space. We had to broaden the audience. So this was a unique summit that didn't just reach out to our traditional landscape architects or park advocates. We wanted to broaden the tent to speak to disruptors and crowdsourcers and artists and others that engage in parks. So it wasn't just breaking down the boundaries of our parks physically, but also through a conversation. And as a result of that summit, people wanted to continue the discussion. And so we launched this discussion, and you'll see there'll be a series of topics we'll be bringing to you over the next year or so to keep that conversation going, because we want to broaden the audience for people who truly support parks and public space. So we're very excited. I'll be serving on the panel, but I'm local. We have some out-of-town guests. When you have your questions, we do encourage you to direct them to our panelists. Of course, if there's a local question, I will answer. So we're very excited to launch this lecture series. Thank you for all coming out. I can see already we have a full house. And so now I'd like to turn it over to our moderator, brand new on the job, Lynn Kelly, Executive Director for New Yorkers for Parks.
Good evening, everyone. How are you tonight? Deaf, I would imagine, after that. I'm so pleased to be here. Thank you for the lovely introduction, Commissioner Silver. Yes, I am the brand new Executive Director of New Yorkers for Parks. And if you don't know us, you will know us soon. We are the 100-year-old advocacy organization to make sure that there are fantastic green spaces in all 5 boroughs. And we do this through research, we do this through advocacy, and we will soon be coming to a borough near you in our Borough by Borough series starting at the end of next month. But here, tonight, I'm with some real pioneers and innovators in the field, and we're going to be talking about how can innovative park planning create a more seamless public realm. And we have fantastic panelists tonight that are going to teach us about this. I'd like to introduce first Jayne Rudolph. For 4 years, Jayne has served as the Director of Parks and Recreation in Arlington, Virginia, which is one of the most densely populated park systems in the country. But I know that many of you in this room know Jayne because for 10 years, this was her stomping ground, where she had many positions within New York City Parks, leaving as the Chief of Staff some years ago. She is a true pioneer, and we know this because she spent much of her childhood in the Wild West playground in Central. A tough crowd here tonight. Pioneer Wild West. Welcome, Jayne. Welcome home. Next, I'd like to introduce Jayne Miller. Jayne Miller, for 6 years, has served as the superintendent of the nationally renowned Minneapolis Parks system, which has been ranked the #1 system in America for 4 years in a row. Go, Jayne. That's fantastic. And I've also learned that Jayne is a New Yorker, vis-a-vis the Adirondacks, where she grew up. Clearly where your love of the outdoors began. And on top of that, she is an avid road cyclist, commuting and traveling the park system close to 2,000 miles a year. Wow, that's a lot. Welcome. Next, I'd like to introduce Kathryn Lovell, who's the Commissioner of Parks and Recreation in Philadelphia. And she's been there for just over a year in that role, but it's not new to her. She's a native Philadelphian, and she was also a consummate fundraiser because prior to being at the head of the Philly Park system, she ran the Fairmont Conservancy. And in this role, she met up with another pioneer, who I'd also like to mention, the tennis legend, Billie Jean King. And it was your savvy fundraising capabilities that allowed and brought Billie Jean to now have a foundation that follows a park. Thank you for that. And there should be more people like that supporting the park system. Congratulations. And then last but not least, our Commissioner Silver, who many of you obviously know in this room, a true innovator in his field. He became our Parks Commissioner in May 2014 and has since launched some really important initiatives in New York City dealing with parks equity and innovation. Parks Without Borders, Community Parks Initiative, Anchor Parks, just to name a few. And he's working really hard to make sure that he goes into each and every neighborhood community park and improves it. And has laser eye focused also on improving the capital system that we have here for producing parks and repairing parks and creating new parks. But did you know that despite this heavy schedule, he's an avid runner? And he often challenges parkies here in the building, in addition to his own family, to, ready for this, Fitbit challenges, and is clocking 22,000 steps a day on average. I'm exhausted already.
Are you going to walk around?
So thank you, Commissioner, for having us here tonight. So the format for this evening is very simple. Each of our guests is going to give a brief 10-minute presentation, followed by some moderated questions. And then I hope that you will all give our out-of-town guests a warm New York City welcome and include your questions as well as the night goes on. Thank you all for coming, and I'm going to turn it over to the first speaker, Jayne.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening. I just want to take a moment to thank Mitch and his team and Lynn for hosting this evening. I think we could probably all give them a big round of applause because it's not easy to pull off. I also really want to thank them for including me this evening. I come from Arlington, Virginia, not Texas, and want to say, we're small, but we like to say we're mighty. We came in 4th ranked as park system this year, so it's been really fun to work to put Arlington on the map. And as Lynn said, I worked for the city for 12 years, 10 of those at the Parks Department, so it's really special for me to be back here tonight. So to tell you a little bit about my system, which is Arlington Parks and Recreation, we are just on the banks of the Potomac River from Washington, D.C. We are very tiny. We're 26 square miles. And we are also a self-governing county. We're the smallest one of that in the country. There's only 3 more counties that are smaller, Manhattan being one of them, but all those other counties are actually run by larger jurisdictions. So we're kind of a strange thing. We are like a city, but we're not. We have our proximity, as you can see, to DC is very close. 6 of the 7 bridges from Virginia to DC go through Arlington. So everything we sort of do sort of has an eye sort of to DC. Arlington, interestingly, is really famous for being a transit-oriented development. When 40 years ago, when the metro was built, Arlington put the metro underground instead of running it out through the highway. And when that happened, we really built up these urban corridors. And when they built up these urban corridors, one of the big things they did was forgot to build parks. So the challenges that we face today often are, how are we, in our very small space with our tight population that is growing, accommodating the parks and recreation needs of our residents and of our daytime population. So we're interesting in that we have about almost 250,000 of residents, but then we also have 300,000 people coming as a daytime population in Arlington. As you all know, we have one of our biggest employers is the Pentagon, our 5-sided building, and I just learned today 25,000 people a day go to the Pentagon. So it's an interesting mix in Arlington. And then here's a little snapshot of sort of how our system is broken down. We have about 22,000 acres total of parkland. We share that with the federal system. There's the National Parks has the George Washington Memorial Parkway. The county has about almost 1,000 acres, and then we also have a regional parks and other areas. Particular note is the school system. Sort of unlike a lot of other jurisdictions, we have an incredibly tight relationship with our school system, and it's how we meet a lot of our parks demands is working with our school system, and I'll talk about that a little later. And then access, and I know everyone sort of talks about access a lot. 87% of our land area is within a quarter mile of a park. But one of the things, and we were actually even talking about it earlier this afternoon, is that while we have this great access, it's the quality of the park that access provides, and also the density around that park. So everybody can walk a quarter mile to a park, but that park could be an acre, and that's feeding thousands of people. So we really have trying to spend a lot of time both on the quality of our system, but also trying to sort of create new levels of service based on our suburban areas and also our urban areas, because that demand can be quite different. So what I thought I'd do for my short time this evening is to sort of focus on to give you a snapshot of our system, but through some of the lenses of the things that we're going to be talking about this evening. Talking about, for us, the challenges we have is between program space and unprogrammed space. The scarce land available in us. We're in this constant battle between getting new properties for not just us, but also our non-park needs of the county, and also our school system. And then also with an increasing diverse population, how do we fill that need? We have more kids, we have seniors who are aging in place, and everybody in between, and they all want to do stuff in parks. And particularly, which was really surprising to me when I came down, there was just a huge sports culture. But my first item is equity. This is a new community center that was opened in 2013, and it is in one of our lowest income areas. Arlington has over 104 languages spoken there, and this is one of those areas where we wanted to build a community center to really represent what Arlington can be. If you can see in the back, there's like a beige building. As a part of the project on county property, we also built a 122-unit affordable housing complex so that the affordable housing could be sort of meshed with the community center. And this does everything from Head Start for the young ones all the way up to a reduced meal or free meal program for our senior population. And including, we also do programs here for English language, and then also our Department of Human Services is also embedded here, so we can be providing wraparound services for everybody. And then of course it's a rec center, so there's a huge gym. All these community items are also put together. Access continues to be an important one. This is one of those few parks that is in the urban corridor, and it used to be just a total wasteland. That is now an artificial turf field. It was once a dust bowl. The way we designed it wasn't bringing people in. So when we redid it 2 years ago, the whole idea was to see how we could really work on circulation, bringing people in. And I drive by here all the time on my way to work, and I have to say, if you drive by here when the school bus is getting out, you don't want to be around because it's just a mad dash. So it's really been amazing to watch what was almost an empty space being sort of used all day long, by all the different generations. Also, another part of our access is that because we are so small, we can't do this alone. So we have to work with our regional partners and the federal government. One of the main interesting ones is we don't have a state park system. We have the Northern Virginia Regional Park Authority, and they run several parks in the whole area. So if you really wanted to go to a huge park or go fishing or go camping, that's where you would go. But one of the neat ones is the W&D Trail, which is an old railroad trail from the Washington Old Dominion Railroad. It's a 45-mile trail, starts in Arlington, and goes 45 miles out into rural Virginia. And so that's how we're able to kind of meet some of our demands, is to have these kinds of linkages from just not our system, but the systems that we partner with. And then another interesting thing that was new to me when I came there was that we also have ourselves totally embedded in the developer site plan process. So when we are working with site plans, like this is a mega block that is actually 3 blocks that we're going to be splitting up, and this is the idea of a 25-year happening over the next 25 years. But they bring parks in to help to design the public realm areas. And I don't know, I always joke when I first came in, I felt like I had plaza fatigue, because you walk around at night and there are all these plazas that are completely empty and no one's using them. And so what we try to do at Parks is get ourselves in with the developers, in with the city planners, or the county planners as we call ourselves, and design really neat public spaces that are privately owned. So this someday will be an acre park surrounded by this development. And also an Esplanade. One of the things you also saw there, which I think shows some of our access problems to go back, is that there's a real barrier all across Arlington to the river and to the Potomac. So over that highway there, you'll see almost 500 acres of federal land that is incredibly difficult to get to. We have very few access points. So there's wonderful trails all the way to Mount Vernon. There's a Theodore Roosevelt Island. These are really incredible spaces. It's incredibly hard to get to. We have a location right near here that's called the intersection of doom, because that is where there are, it's not actually, it's kind of a funny name, but we have so many bike, ped, and vehicle accidents because that's where everyone's trying to converge and try to get to these spaces. So a real goal for us is, and a dream would be to say, deck over our highway and bring people down to the river, but it all takes dollars, right? And then just to get to that collaboration I was talking about before, it's kind of hard to see here, but so this is a whole huge park site, and there's a building in the middle there, and that building is a public school. And our department maintains all the fields, all of the outdoor areas for all the schools, no matter who owns the property. So sometimes we own the property, sometimes schools owns the properties. We are in every single school running programs, because that's the only way we can meet our basketball and volleyball needs. We are just enmeshed in our school system. But this whole park, except for the sliver of that middle school, is owned by the Parks Department. But there's such a demand for new schools that they want to take a parking lot, a very large parking lot that is parkland, and turn it into an elementary school. And the advocates, park advocates, were pretty frustrated, because that means the future of even though it looks like a parking lot today, someday it could have been parkland, but instead that's now lost because that's going to become an elementary school. So kind of a frustrating thing to try to get that balance with our school system. We see it as the only way to meet our demand, but then at the same time, 2 other projects that are happening in Arlington right now are taking away parkland for schools. So it's like a constant challenge. And then partnerships. This is our big sports complex. It was a $37 million sports, mostly fields, and huge rain gardens, and all these different types of sort of sustainability. We are now about to kick off a $64 million phase 2 to build an aquatic center on here. And we can't always do these things alone. So we've partnered with a local university, Marymount, who is now the home of their soccer and lacrosse. And then we also, sort of down the road, we partner with George Washington University as well to be the home for their baseball. So these partnerships enable us to do these projects, and we also are able to, in some regards, provide more public access because we're able to maintain them and keep them going. I've been told I need to be done, so I'm just trying to hurry it up. And then we can't do this alone. Community engagement is a huge thing in every single thing we do. We are in the process right now of updating our public spaces master plan. It's the master plan that guides us everywhere we go. We specifically called it the public spaces master plans because it goes beyond parks. This is a recent charrette we did on it, and it was really kind of neat because similar to some of the things that we're doing here, we also invited our developers, we invited architects, we invited the real estate community, business owners, our bids to come to the table with us and spend a day doing a visual plan of what we want our park system to become. So we have these challenges, but we have an incredibly engaged citizenry, so we're really lucky that we're able to kind of have these kind of conversations and look to see where the park system is going to go in the future. And with that, I want to say thank you for having me, and I look forward to a really robust conversation.
Good evening. I'm Jayne Miller from Minneapolis, and I too want to thank Commissioner Silva and Lynn for inviting me here. It's really an honor to be here and a privilege. And while I'm not from New York City, it is really nice to be back home. So one of the things that's really instrumental to understand about the Minneapolis Park System is really to understand the history of the Minneapolis, the city, and the history of the Minneapolis Park Board. It is really that foundation that has created the system that we have today. And so I'm going to talk a little bit and walk you through our history and talk with you also about some of the issues we're facing today. Minneapolis is surrounded by an abundant set of natural resources. We have the Mississippi River, we have 22 lakes in the city of Minneapolis, plus a number of other natural resources. In 1870, the population of Minneapolis was just over 13,000, and within 20 years, it exploded to over 165,000. That explosive growth was really driven by the lumber industry and the flour, F-L-O-U-R industry. Gold Medal flour, Pillsbury, those are all based in Minneapolis. In fact, Minneapolis was the home of the flour industry for decades. So because of that explosive growth, the City Council was really faced with significant challenges of building bridges, roads, hospitals, schools, and wasn't focused on protecting the natural resources. Minneapolis had been fortunate that landscape architect Horace Cleveland had been to Minneapolis a number of times and talked about the value of the natural resources we had. And so there were some key influential business leaders in the city who really wanted to preserve those natural resources. Cleveland had said, listen, you need to protect those resources before they're either degraded or too expensive to acquire. So because of the work he had done, those influential city leaders, under the opposition of the City Council at the time, went straight to the Minnesota legislature and requested that the legislature create an elected park board, independent of City Council, with its own authority to acquire and manage land and levy its own taxes. The Minnesota legislature authorized that in 1883, and then in April of that same year, the citizens ratified and created the independent park board that we have today in Minneapolis. The first thing that the park board did when they got elected was to hire Horace Cleveland to develop a blueprint, or what today we would call a master plan, for the park system. This is Cleveland's blueprint, and in fact, many parts, as you can imagine, of that blueprint at the time were not within the city of Minneapolis, but they are today. What's in red, the line, is what with his vision of what today is our Grand Rounds, which encircles the city, and I'll show you on a future slide that Grand Rounds. The park board also, in addition to hiring Horace Cleveland, they started to acquire land around some of the water bodies in the city. And today, over 70% of the land abutting those bodies of water are publicly owned park spaces. That is one of the hallmarks of the park system in Minneapolis. It's very unique across the country. We have 22 lakes in the city of Minneapolis, and even in the wealthiest sections of Minneapolis, those bodies of water and the land adjacent to are not privately owned. It's public parkland with public access. In addition to acquiring land along the lakes and the land for parkways, the park board also established one park in each section of the city. With all of the land, we got also a number of land donations to the park board, as well as the acquisitions they made. Between the late 1800s and the early 1900s, Minneapolis became a city built around its park system. And so we are in a unique position as a city because the park system was built first. We aren't facing some of the challenges most other cities, in fact, I don't know another city in the country who isn't faced with the challenges of acquiring parkland and making connectivity for its residents. We don't have those issues. The park board also became really known for its responsiveness to its citizens, which led to its continued growth and expansion and adding of amenities. Parks truly became the center of community life, as you can see depicted in these pictures. Between the mid-1960s and the late 1970s, the park board built 37 recreation centers across the city, and they developed 14 new parks. It was during this time that the park board really achieved a more equitable distribution of parks and facilities throughout the city and acquired park in nearly every single neighborhood in the city. We have 83 neighborhoods in the city, and so every single neighborhood has at least one park in its neighborhood. Now I want to talk to you about the work that we've been doing in the present day. Over the last 15 years, we have seen and worked really hard to expand our trail system. It is the #1 most valued piece in our system. There's over 129 miles of on-street bike facilities and over 140 miles of off-street or trail facilities throughout the parks. This expansion has really been key to the access of trails and parks and other destinations across the city. We have over 200 bike share stations throughout the city, many of them in our parks, so that people can easily access anywhere in the city. Over 136 miles of our trails are cleared every single day in the winter because people demand them. In fact, we get complaints if our trails are not cleared by 6 a.m. in the morning because people use them for commuting and getting out and exercising in the morning. We have an automated trail counter system, and we have over 28 million trail user miles on our trails annually in the city. Our trails, predominantly, as much as we can, are separated for bike and pedestrian use because of the heavy use we get on them. We also map our trails as low-stress transitways for commuting, which are really critical for low-income residents who need low-cost ways to get throughout the city. We also have initiated River First, which we did an international design competition in 2010. This is the last section of actually waterways that we do not own. It's the last 5.5 mile stretch of the Mississippi River where we want to acquire land and develop destination parks along the river. These are photos of actually the Mississippi River in Minneapolis. The photo on the left is about a 4-mile stretch in the center core of downtown Minneapolis. Over the last 30 years, we've actually been acquiring parkland and building destination parks, which is what's shown on the left. Just to give you some perspective, one of the values of Minneapolis is people really recognize the economic development value of parks. Over $300 million of public funds were invested on the Central Riverfront to acquire parkland and develop parkland, translated to over $2 billion of private investment along the river. We're planning to do the same thing. The photo on the right is the River First section of the river. That's that 5.5 mile stretch where we're going to acquire parkland on both sides of the river, create destination parks, create these mile loops along the river so it's easy jogging and biking trails along the river. The other thing so the two major areas that we are lacking in parks is along the river, that we're providing not only parks but people's access directly to the Mississippi. But for a city known for its park system, the downtown has a donut hole. We are really void of green space. And so we have a downtown 2025 plan that's focusing on greening downtown, tree plantings downtown, greening of our Nicollet Mall, which is a linear business extension in the city, adding parks to downtown and connecting the downtown to the river that's only 3 blocks from the river, the downtown, and then also connecting to other parks across the city. This is our pictures of a huge park that we just have built in Minneapolis. The top left photo is what that used to be, which was a surface parking lot. And then the other 2 photos are of the construction. It's downtown commons. There's a lot of controversy about how this got created, but it is the backdrop. The backdrop is US Bank Stadium, which is the new home of the Minnesota Vikings football stadium, which opened a year ago. What's been interesting here is not only this is the downtown commons, and that is up and running today, but what is amazing as well, in a 2-year period of time, not only the development of this park, the building of the new stadium, but all of the development that's occurred around this park has been absolutely incredible. Now I want to talk about programming and recreation needs. Many people think of Minneapolis and think of 2 things, cold and Scandinavians, which is our history. Minneapolis historically is a very Scandinavian and German city, and Minnesota as a whole. Today, 40% of Minneapolis is minority or people of color. I don't think most people would realize that. We have the largest Somali population in the United States, and in fact, outside of the country is Somali. We also have the largest Hmong population in the United States, and our Latino is our fastest growing population. So the city of Minneapolis is changing dramatically, but we also have cold. And so as you can see, we have a number of activities that go on in our parks in the winter, and you can see they are heavily used. People in Minneapolis are outside, whether it's the summer, winter, or fall. They love being outside. So we are expanding our programming both in the winter and then spring, summer, and fall. We have over 250 annual events that we sponsor and host across our park system that are special events across the city. Also, from a programming perspective, we're also responding to the changing demographics. We have a lot of youth programming that's geared at reaching at-risk youth, minority youth, immigrants into the city. All of us know that urban communities today are facing greater and greater disparities economically. And we work really hard to reach these at-risk kids or low-income families, because if we can connect them to their parks, we provide a great safe space and a positive experience for them and develop life skills. 80% of what we do as adults in our leisure time is based on what we do as kids. And so we need to get kids engaged in positive parks and recreation activities so they have life skills that they can choose to participate as adults. So we have an Urban Explorers program, a Night Owls programs, and Swimways program, all designed to connect, use our trails, connect people to our parks, and get kids engaged in positive activities. This year, we celebrated our 25th anniversary of our Teen Teamworks program, which is an employment program for youth and young adults ages 14 to 24, solely focused on at-risk youth. Any employee that we hire through this program has to meet a minimum of one of our high-risk areas in order to be employed. They work as with our master gardeners, for example, to plan and design flower gardens. They're involved in our environmental education program. We also have them working in our recreation centers. Time's almost up, so I'm going to go quickly. We also, as I said, we have 22 lakes. We don't allow any motorboats on our lakes. We own them. We do all the water quality testing on them. We provide almost 1,000 sailboat and canoe and kayak racks along the river, along our lakes, so that you can get to them. And we built in 2015 the first natural filtration swimming pool in North America that uses absolutely no chemicals, 500,000 gallon swimming pool that uses natural filtration systems to clean the water. One of the other key things that we've been doing, every urban system also is faced with an aging infrastructure. So over the last 2 years, we did a lot of work of being able to identify in every single park where we have spent our resources. This is the system-wide by asset type, the funding, capital funding back to 2000. What is in red is the gap in funding. And we were successful. We thought we were going to have to do a referendum, but we were so successful in our education campaign that City Council actually entered in a 20-year agreement with us for $250 million to invest in our neighborhood for parks for maintenance, rehab, and capital of our parks. First in the history of our relationship with the city. And then finally, I just want to talk with you, just to give you some quick snapshots of city. 95% of our residents live within a 10-minute walk of a park. Nearly 83% of our residents are active every single day, and more than half of our city residents get at least the government-recommended 30 minutes of moderate activity every day. And finally, I share this slide with you both because I'm really proud of Minneapolis, but I also think that you will see a pattern here. That I think that you will see these accolades that Minneapolis as a city has received are directly connected to the amazing park system we have. And that I believe it's the incredible vision of the key leaders in our city early on to ensure that they protected the natural resources that we have today. It's because the Park Board is an independent body that can solely focus its time and energy on park issues. And it's because the Park Board has continued to be innovative and responsive to a citizenry. And finally, that the lifestyle and active living ethos in the city has been created due to the system of parks that we have in Minneapolis. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. That's a tough act to follow. Best biking city on Earth. Earth's like really big. I'm Kathryn. I'm the Commissioner for Parks and Recreation in the city of Philadelphia, your neighbors to the south. I am thrilled to be here this evening. I'm going to thank Mitch and his team for inviting me. I'm really excited that this is being live streamed. I don't think I've ever been live streamed before, so I want to say, where's the camera? Anyone? What is it?
Right there.
I want to say to my daughters Lucy and Joe, my husband's going to kill me. It's almost bedtime. No, so anyway. So back onto real stuff. Seriously, my husband's, he's texting me right now. I can feel it buzzing. So this is Philadelphia in a long time ago when our city was founded. Green space was really at the forefront of William Penn, our city's founder, original vision for the city. He founded the city, he organized the city around these 5 squares. They were set aside as public, shared, common spaces. And they exist that way today. The original 5 public spaces are still thriving and functioning and as an organizing framework for our center city. We know them today as Dilworth Park, Logan Circle, Franklin Square, Rittenhouse, and Washington Square. Meanwhile, the growing industry in Philadelphia along the river was really threatening our city's water supply. The Schuylkill River in particular, which is one of our main rivers, we have 2 rivers that border our city. It was very polluted, needed protection. Reckless dumping was leading to widespread illness, including outbreaks of typhoid fever. And the increased public pressure fueled debates in city government for a cleaner river for safer drinking water. And so we did something truly innovative back in 1821. We built the Fairmount Waterworks. The earliest waterworks building was constructed in 1812 to feed the water needs of a growing city. It was built in the years that preceded the Industrial Revolution, and it drew visitors from all over the world. People had never seen anything like it. A trip to Philadelphia in the 19th century always included a visit to this spectacular engineering marvel. And I say this because the Fairmount Waterworks was really the beginning of the creation of the Fairmount Park system in Philadelphia. The creation of Fairmount Park a few years after the end of the Civil War was intended to protect the quality of our city's water supply. It was a direct response to the impact of industrial development along the Schuylkill, and throughout the 1800s, the city of Philadelphia purchased all of this land along the Schuylkill River, creating what is today known as East and West Fairmount Park. So fast forward 100 years or so, and we were one of the so we're the city of first, right? We had the first hospital, not to brag, but we had the first hospital. You know, we had the first zoo. You know, there was a couple important documents signed in Philadelphia. We may or may not have invented democracy, but we were the last of the major cities to merge our Parks and Recreation Department. We're not great with change, I would say, on a whole. So for 150 years, our park system, Fairmount Park, was managed by a board appointed by judges called the Fairmount Park Commission. But in 2008, a majority of our voters approved a merger between the Fairmount Park Commission and the Department of Recreation. And I will tell you that is a merger that is still ongoing today. Also known as a collision. Those of you who worked in city government. This is what our map of our system, all of our assets look like today. The blue is all of our recreation facilities. The green, obviously, is all of our parkland. This gives you a sense of sort of the total scope of the park system, about 10,000 acres of land, more swimming pools per capita than any city in the country, a ton of swimming pools. People love our pools. We have a lot of rec centers. I was surprised when I heard other major cities had fewer rec centers. We have 150 rec centers throughout the city of Philadelphia. We were known, back in the day as the workshop of the world. This is a really old image of one of the mills in Kensington section of the city. It was a real industrial hub. But what happened over the starting in the 1960s, things started to dramatically change. Industry left, the population declined. This happened in many cities throughout the country, and Philadelphia was no different. So between 1960 and 2000, we saw a population decline of almost 25%. We were left with an inventory of public facilities designed for 2 million people, but with only 1.5 million residents left living in the city. At the same time, we were ramping up. We were building new recreation centers throughout the system as people were leaving the city in droves. Declines in our tax revenue meant drastic cuts to the former Fairmount Park Commission and the Department of Recreation, and our public spaces didn't fare well because of it. And then good stuff happened, right? After the recession, population began to increase throughout the early 2000s, and our center city became truly revitalized. We started to believe in ourselves again, and the tide slowly turned to a brighter future. We started to invest in public spaces in Center City. This is Franklin Square, which is an amazing little park right in the heart of the historic area that was transformed. This is this is Sister Cities Park, which was transformed about 5 years ago, a beautiful space right across from our cathedral. This is right on our waterfront called Spruce Street Harbor Park. It was voted America's #1 urban beach. Really just an amazing space that pops up every summer. This is Dilworth Park right in front of our city hall, which was a barren wasteland, like a concrete jungle, and is now an amazing space for Philadelphians. This is our beautiful Schuylkill River Trail. We now have an amazing boardwalk that extends the trail over the river, continues the trail all along our waterfront. We have well over 1 million visitors a year using that trail. These are projects that are upcoming in Center City. This is our own High Line. I've been to your High Line. It's nice. When I was there, it was like a people mover at the airport. You're like, it's so many people. I couldn't believe it. It was really amazing. So kudos on that. So we're building our own. Really just to save on tolls. So our viaduct, it's called the Viaduct, and it's our elevated rail park. It'll be the first phase of it is just a spur, and it'll be completed in the next 9 months or so. And then sort of a really iconic project is Love Park in the center of our city, right across from our offices, across from City Hall, will be completely restored within the next year, which is really exciting too. So we got pretty cool over the years, just show that. We started to believe in ourselves, and we proved, if nothing else, we are resilient. I had to throw that in there. Some good people visited, right? This guy. Fairmount Park did host a people visit twice. I'm just saying, there aren't many parks that have done that. We had JP2 back in 1979, and then Pope Francis himself came and a few others for the World Meeting of Families. And then, of course, the DNC came as well, which was really exciting. So some great things have happened. But the real question remains is, can we replicate the same success we've had in Center City throughout our neighborhoods? I've been in this job less than a year. I spent the first 3 months in this position doing the rounds, right? Out there visiting parks and recreation centers throughout the system. I probably visited 10 recreation centers a week, just meeting staff and getting to know some of these spaces. And it was 3 of the toughest months of my life. We have under-resourced these facilities for the better part of 3 decades. There are amazing programs happening inside of them. Kids are being served in incredible ways. The staff are dedicated and passionate, but the facilities themselves are falling apart. These are some of the pictures I took with my phone when I visited these facilities. This is very typical. 22 of the first 25 playgrounds I visited did not have any swings, because when the safety surface gets ruined, we remove the swings because it's a safety hazard, right? So that means that almost none of our playgrounds that are of a certain age have any swings, right? And it's like a swing graveyard, right? It looks like there were swings there at some point, but nothing there for kids to play with now. So a really tough time. We have some beautiful parks, as I mentioned, but more than those, we have some facilities that have some real problems. But we have a great new mayor, my boss, so I have to say that, but I would anyway, if he's watching, just in case. No, Jim Kenney was a city councilman for more than 20 years, so he really understands. Sorry, what did the sign say? I missed it. Okay, got that. Copy that. So Jim Kenney is an extraordinary man, a great mayor, really understands our city. He came up with an initiative called Rebuild, which is an investment in civic infrastructure throughout our city, specifically an investment in parks, recreation centers, and libraries. It is $500 million that'll be invested in parks and recreation centers and libraries over the next 7 years. It's coming fast, and we're going to do a lot at once. Revenue from our newly instituted Philadelphia beverage tax during soda-build parks will be used to help find, under Mayor Nutter, it was all about hiding your soda. It was all about health, like soda's bad, hide it under the table when he walks in the room. Under Mayor Kenney, if you don't drink the soda, in my opinion, because I drink a lot of soda, I don't know if he would say that, but anyway, it'll be used to help finance the bonds to support Rebuild. The 2 primary goals of Rebuild are equity and economic growth. This is about giving, resourcing communities that have been suffering for decades, and also about resourcing communities that are on the cusp of change. We looked at a ton of data. We collected data to really look at how we should invest this, and we looked at everything from poverty, drug offenses, to household growth and where building permits were being pulled. We have 400 possible rebuild sites all over the city in every neighborhood. We're going to get to them all. Success for rebuild will look like this. We will create a park and rec system that is equitable and accessible. We will incorporate high quality design. We will have a robust civic engagement process, and we will drive economic and community development throughout the entire city. And people will have opportunities, parks, and recreation centers and libraries, regardless of their zip code, high quality. I want to talk about two other quick initiatives because they play into the theme of Parks with No Borders, less from a physical standpoint, more about a programmatic standpoint. Our Parks on Tap program was a citywide traveling beer garden that started out just at one park, and then every weekend traveled to a new park in a new neighborhood, not just Center City, neighborhoods all over the city. It was immensely popular. I was going to be really happy if it broke even. You know, when they first came to me with the idea, we ended up making a really decent amount of revenue from it as well, but it was just a wonderful way to bring people into parks where they might not normally go, to help them meet their neighbors, and just to activate the parks and make them more accessible. Another thing I wanted to mention, again, in terms of thinking about Parks with No Borders from a very programmatic standpoint, is our Philadelphia International Unity Cup, which was our mayor's idea and was a citywide soccer tournament modeled after the World Cup, which was a celebration of our diversity, invited teams from people to come and support teams or recommend teams that were from 32 different countries, and we had 32 different countries represented, over 800 players. We played 60 games all over the city in 8 weeks. We had our championship game at Citizens Bank Park, our ballpark, which was the first soccer game ever held there. We did a naturalization ceremony on the field. Ivory Coast was the winner. There are probably 800 Ivorians in the entire city. They were all there. This was very exciting for the Ivory Cote d'Ivoire immigrants to Philadelphia. But just a really wonderful initiative to celebrate diversity and to celebrate all of the amazing, and to really use soccer as a unifier in that. And these are some other great images. And that's it. Thank you guys so much. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you to our panelists tonight. We have a lively panel, which can only mean a more lively discussion. And I'm going to start with Kathryn because, Kathryn, I got to say, you had me at beer and soccer, hands down. But what it spoke to me about in your presentation was that you were able in a very short period of time at the helm of the park system in Philly to really use placemaking and programming as a unifier. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that as a strategy for parks equity and unifying communities. I thought that was a very interesting piece of the presentation.
So I think for me, I sort of have an informal motto in my head, and I learned this really during my time at the Fairmount Park Conservancy. It's not enough just to bring parks back to life. We have to bring people back to parks, right? And I think for a long time, there was a mindset in Philly, and I'm sure other places, that parks were meant to be protected and preserved. And of course they are, right? It's a no-brainer. Parks should be protected and preserved. But they also need to be activated. And I think, we're a city, Philadelphia, that has, great disparity among our citizens, right? We have a huge influx of millennials, one of the highest growth rate of millennials of any city in the country. We also are one of the most economically segregated cities in the country. I think that parks really serve as a vehicle for greater social and economic integration. You come to a park and you sit next to someone, and your children play together, or you talk about each other's dogs, or you talk about the weather, and whether that happens spontaneously or whether it's the result of a program like Parks on Tap or a program like the Unity Cup, there's something that happens there that really does away with the isolation that we all, that happens to us right now. I mean, we, are a society that is able to order, we used to go to the library 50 years ago, and now we order our books on Amazon, or better yet, just download them to our Kindle. We used to go to public pools, right? But now, 50% of people have pools in their backyard, Instead of going to, out to exercise, we have a private gym, or we belong to a gym, Instead of, going out and hearing what everyone has to say, we just read the news on our Facebook feed. We get to see what we want to watch, and that's about it. And I think parks create a really great opportunity to begin to break that down, to break down those silos, and to bring people together in ways that we just don't have the opportunity to do.
Totally agree. Thank you. Jayne, let's talk about Arlington. Oh, this Jayne? Yeah. Let's talk about Arlington a little bit. So the way I see it to some degree is your work here in New York City was like your boot camp for learning parks, if you will. And so I was wondering, now that you've been in another city and spent some time there, what type of lessons, perhaps, or best practices that you learned in New York have you brought to Arlington? And conversely, have you learned things there that you think we could benefit from?
I think to start with, one of the things while watching these amazing presentations, it really struck me, and something I really miss from working is in a historic park system. So Arlington is not an historic park system, as you can sort of see from our pictures. The way we developed is very much as a bedroom community after World War II. And so seeing the value that I think people place sometimes in the history of their park system is really, really different. And part of being a bedroom community also was we didn't go through a rough time in the 70s or 80s. And so our system didn't suffer in the same way. And so we don't have a system of conservancies. We don't have a system of advocates, really, and we don't really have a system we have volunteers, but not that sort of friends group, not that sort of deep connection I think people feel to parks. And when I came down there from New York, I was like, where are the advocates? Where are the friends groups? And some of the things I talked about that really have hit is in the past 4 years, there's been a real affront to attack on parks because of our needs for other infrastructure needs, for schools, for other pieces. And so I've been able to help and work to sort of build up some of those groups that never existed before. And I think having that lens from New York really helped. Another piece too was data. I think Arlington is a little behind on some of that, and coming out of New York with the whole parks inspection program and all the data, one of the things that this past year we were ranked number 4 from the Trust for Public Land as the top, park system in the country, and it was sort of amazing to be seen with these other groups. We're the 100th largest park system, and I think we've always been great, but we didn't have the data. So when I found out that we weren't putting it into these systems, we started to really look at our performance measures, started to really look at our needs, really look at things, but not just because we felt like it needed to be done, but because we actually had data to sort of back it up. And so some of those things from New York are definitely playing in how we see ourselves today.
Thank you. Jayne, number 1 4th of July celebration, really? We'll give it to you for tonight.
Absolutely.
So I want to talk to you a little bit about innovation in not just design, because design is almost a function of the placemaking and the events. And you noted very correctly that obviously your park system is very popular, and people come there year-round in very harsh winters in different climates, probably fluctuating harder and harder every year. And so I was wondering if you could speak to a little bit as to how do you get people beyond just, let's say, the programming to come year in and year out, those numbers that you keep up in terms of attendance. And are there innovations in design that you have made to make up for some of the harsh climate that you deal with?
It's a great question, and most people, when they think of Minnesota, it's like, oh my God, I'm not going to go there in the winter. But Minnesotans are a hardy soul. And whether it's, as I mentioned, whether it's summer or winter, they are outside. And I think some of the photos demonstrated of our winter activities how popular it is to be outside. The fact that the demand that we have to clear 140 miles of trails in the winter, because people expect every day they're going to walk around the lake. They do it every day. They want to get out before they go to work and do it, or they're going to use our trails to commute to work. We have one of the fastest growing winter bike populations in the country. Surprising. But again, I think it's part of what is Minnesotan. I think the other thing is I'm a very active person, obviously, because I cycle as much as I do. But even when I moved to Minneapolis, I'm not from Minnesota. when I moved there, I've talked with my staff, there is this yin and yang. Did Minneapolis become a great park system because people wanted it, or did the park system get created and the ease of access to that park system create an environment where people want to be outside and be active? And so when you're there, you see people in the dead of winter out walking or on their fat tire bikes, and you feel guilty if you're not out there. So I don't think there's a lot we have to do. Clearly, we provide amenities. We have 63 outdoor ice rinks. We have the Pond Hockey Championships, U.S. Pond Hockey Championships. We have the largest winter Lopet Festival, which is cross-country skiing and speed skating, 6 days worth of festivals and events that draws tens of thousands of people to not only compete but watch. So granted, there are things we have to do to provide access to those things, but it's also the community demands it from us. And so it's this yin and yang of us providing it and the community demanding and expecting it of us.
Thank you. Commissioner Silver. I too come at parks through a planning background, and so I was very interested when I read about your background. And so I was wondering, just very directly, when you plan ahead and you think about your vision or you think about projects, what comes first? Is it the parkie in you? Is it the planner in you? Or is it both?
It's both. And for the record, and talk about number ones, we are the most Instagrammed park system on the planet. With the High Line being number one for whatever reason. It's both. I mean, clearly my career was in urban planning, dealt with parks, but as I approached the job, I soon realized that it wasn't just parks by itself, it's parks and public space. And very often we put these parks on islands and within a box or behind a fence or a wall, but it's more than that. If you look at our city, parks represents 14% of our footprint. Streets and sidewalks represents 26%. So 40% of our city is in the public realm. And yet we have agencies overseeing parts of it. And our goal is really, as a planner, is to make sure it's seamless and connected. I've been to cities that are park starved. I was in Sydney giving a lecture, and they were saying we're running out of space. I'm saying, I think theirs was similar to 40%. You have misused your parks and your streets, and you can make those into open spaces and connect them to your parks. So the planner part of me, I would say planning first. I've always appreciated parks, and every time people do presentations, they don't realize it, but they're always taking pictures of public spaces and parks. That's just our image of a city beside the skyline. So I'd have to say I'm now growing more to be a parkie. I'm appreciating it a lot more. When I was on the planning side, it was a lot of NIMBY, not in my backyard. But I love about parks, it's always YIMBY. You're always happy and smiling. I love being around parkies. So for me as a planner, I wanted to make sure that every city has an anatomy, and parks and public space plays a big role. But I wanted to broaden the conversation, not just to be these parks, these green islands, but to broaden it to be connected to all the other incredible public spaces within our city, including the private realm as well, these privately owned public spaces that also is part of the inventory.
And on behalf of all New Yorkers, thank you for your dedication to parkland and our open spaces. So before we turn to the audience for a little Q&A, I'd like to make a fine point on something. Each of these commissioners here, each of these innovators and pioneers, just to put this in context for you, it's no secret that cities in the United States are growing. People are moving to cities. So our park systems have that much more attendance, that much more wear and tear. The cities have that much more density. And each of these folks here today manages to balance the nuance of development and open space and programming and maintenance, and does it within very tough financial margins. So I would like to commend you all for the excellent work you're doing in leading your city's park system, and thank you for coming tonight. I'm excited about visiting each and every one of your parks. I already know what I want to do when I go to them first. So thank you on behalf of all of us. So with that, I'd like to do a little Q&A from the audience. And since we're a large group, I'm actually going to stand up so it's easier for you to see me. If you wouldn't mind stating your name, and for fun, tell us your favorite park in New York City or your favorite park activity, and then we'll direct it at the panelists for questions. First question, sir.
First of all, I want to say thank you to Commissioner Silver for having this special series. And I'm not just saying that just because I'm an intern and you're technically my boss. but no, yeah, so I'll start with my name. I'm Marcus. I actually had the privilege of going to all of your parks, or park systems. But since you asked for New York specifically, I would say my favorite park is Soundview Park because it's close to where I live, great trail, and great views of the city. So yeah, to my question. So America's biggest cities serve as a model to smaller towns and cities for good ideas and good governance. How should city parks best spread its ideas and the benefits of a connected parks and broad park system outside of its borders into its surrounding communities such as suburbs and small outside town? Best practices, planning techniques, to sort of create not just a seamless system within your city, but a seamless region park system. Thank you.
Well, I'll tackle this a little bit from the perspective of being in Minneapolis. One of the things, because the Minneapolis and the St. Paul park systems are so old, they're actually older than the state park system in Minnesota, that actually we don't have any state parks in the metropolitan area. In fact, there's criteria, but we have what are called neighborhood parks and regional parks. And the regional parks in the metropolitan area in the Twin Cities serve as the state parks. And so we are fortunate from that regard that there are 10 implementing agencies, of which the Park Board is one of them. We have the City of St. Paul, counties, and another city that serve as the implementing agencies for those regional parks and actually work together to go to the state legislature to get funding for our regional parks. And so the system of regional parks in the metropolitan area actually takes that concept and expands what we do individually, but collectively this regional system and reporting and how we work together to create a regional system in the entire Twin Cities.
And also, we have a great system here in New York of both federal, state, and local parks. One way of doing that is the east, usually it's done through greenways. These are park systems that can traverse counties and states. There is an East Coast Greenway that travels along the East Coast. It gets developed and connected over time, but at least there's a concept of having the ability of connecting all of that. Also, the Regional Plan Association, when they do their regional plans, look very carefully at an open space plan. They cover basically a tri-state area of New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, and so they take a step back, and when they do their regional plan, typically focus on opportunities for open space because we don't have any regional entity that actually takes a look. There are probably other advocacy groups, but that is one in terms of this region that tries to figure out how we can connect and expand some of the open spaces to make this region, the whole tri-state region, more livable.
And as probably one of the smaller jurisdictions that sort of is a leader in Northern Virginia, for these smaller ones, we really need to partner and to work together. So I am part of a group of Northern Virginia directors who meet regularly, who email each other when one of us is doing some sort of study to get their feedback. We bounce our budgets off each other. We do a lot of work to sort of collaborate because I think we realize that the only way for our region to be successful is not only for our individual jurisdiction to be successful, but each of ours together because we sort of create that whole DC region. And we're looking at other ways because dollars are tight. That pool that I sort of talked about, we're in talks that maybe with Alexandria that we would be able to partner together so that our neighbor jurisdiction could also be using our facilities. So we're realizing that as we go forward, we need to not just have Parks Without Borders within our own jurisdiction, but actually with our neighbors all around and those who we share borders with. Because for us, right across one of our little runs or rivers that we have is another jurisdiction. And so we're both together trying to improve the water quality, improve the land, because if our side looks great and theirs doesn't, it's not going to be great for the citizens who really don't care who owns the property.
Thank you. Gentleman right here, your name, your favorite park, and your question, please.
Thank you very much. It was a very enjoyable presentation. My name is David Zellman. I am a parkie right now. My favorite park is Riverside Park. That's the park that I live by. I have really two questions. Number one, I think one of the things that Commissioner Silver didn't mention in his background is architecture background. And I think that architecture has an ability to play an incredible part in the design and in the function of all parks. I think people come to see architecture, and then neighborhoods feel proud to have a park that people come to see, and that, you know, sort of helps along in maintaining the park. But my question in terms of the fleet, you mentioned all your parks, but you mentioned nothing about the fleet that you have servicing those parks. Can you give us some idea as to the size of your fleet? What piece, for example, what piece of equipment do you think is like your most important? And do you have your own garage?
All of it.
Well, yeah.
It's an interesting question. We basically want to make sure we always looking to have the most modern equipment. I mean, it's a fact. I've never been asked that question before, so that's why I'm kind of pausing. But as you know, there's a lot of operations. We do equipment for beaches, for trash removal, for taking care. I mean, it is enormous. I mean, we always want to have a replacement cycle of about 6 years. That's something we ask for in the budget. It's just difficult because for our park system, we have close to 2,000 parks of all different types, including natural areas and beaches. It's a complex question, but we have the full array and always looking to replenish what we have. And I'm.
Work at Fleet.
Oh, you work at Fleet. So you know we've been trying in this budget to get our replacement cycle sooner. So that was an inside baseball question.
Commissioner,
Anyone?
I have to say, my favorite is the beach Zamboni. Have you ever seen that thing?
We have the
I
clean-
love that.
Yes. Yes. We have a boat. More than one.
I've never been asked this question either, and so thinking about off the top of my head how many pieces of equipment we have, I can't even fathom to guess, hundreds of them. And I would say that one of the major efforts that we have had is in two areas of our operation. One is trash collection and forestry. Not only do we take care of all the park trees, but we are responsible for all the street trees as well in the city. And forestry is the most dangerous profession actually in the country. Urban foresters, or foresters in general, climbing trees. And so both that, our arborists and our park keeper staff who collect trash, we have mechanized as much as possible the work that they do to reduce work injuries and make it safer for them to do their jobs. Not that those pieces of equipment are any more important than others, but in terms of worker safety, those are the two most dangerous jobs in terms of work injury for employees. So, we've put a lot of effort in focusing on buying equipment that mechanizes the work that they do.
Well, I can just, because I need to brag too, right? Is that, so we two years ago were charged by our board to start plowing our trails so that people can commute on them the day after a storm. And for trails, they also have to be actually better than streets because you don't want to have a bike accident. So we got a really cool really cool equipment, or big machines to plow, brush, and clean our trails. And this past year, I got to drive one, so that was super neat. But I have to say, in terms of cool equipment, that was our most recent purchase. So it's pretty amazing what you can do with technology these days.
I'll answer.
Dying to know what your favorite piece of equipment is.
I've only been in the job about 10 months, so not only do I not know the answer to that question, I'm not even sure who I'd call. So I will think this over tonight on the way home, and I will make sure that I prioritize that. So I've seen some equipment. I know it's out there. It looks all right. I'm not, sorry.
Any ladies in the house with a question? Yes, please. Your name and your favorite park. And your question. This young woman right there. Thank you.
Thanks. My name is Alex. My favorite park is Prospect Park. So we have an affordable housing crisis in the city, and publicly owned land is scarce, and sometimes we run into situations where the choice is a park or public housing. So I'm curious, Jayne from Arlington mentioned a situation where the choice was a park or a school. And I'm curious if you have other examples of those kinds of tensions between, the many uses we could have for those spaces. And if there's a situation where a park won, what was it that tipped the scales and got you to park that time?
I already spoke about it. Do you want to try?
We're, again, in Minneapolis, because our park system is so old and we're not really, the only places we're acquiring land and developing parks is along the river and downtown. That in the core of our downtown, the development that's coming in has mixed use development with affordable housing in it. So we don't run into those issues very much in Minneapolis. I can tell you other communities I've worked in, we have. But again, I think we're in a very unique situation in Minneapolis.
I do challenge a lot of cities that think creatively. There is parks, but there's also public space. I already suggested that out of that 40% public realm, there are unique ways that you can use public streets, sometimes temporary parkland, sometimes permanent parkland, but also the opportunity for schools. This is a great way, and I really applaud Arlington. The situation here is a little bit different in New York, where we have to negotiate when some of those playgrounds, some are jointly operated playgrounds, some we can't get access to, but you shouldn't have to be forced to make those choices. You have to balance affordable housing as well as open space, because you're not just building affordable housing, you're building livable neighborhoods. And housing, open space, and density must go together. So to me, we have to figure out a way we're accomplishing both. In all of our rezonings, we're working with city planning to make sure as the housing goes up, we're finding opportunities to expand or enhance existing open space. And that, in my opinion, is the right approach. Here in New York, the mayor put aside a neighborhood improvement fund to make sure those opportunities are acquired or as part of the rezoning process. So they're not mutually exclusive. Open space and density go together like peanut butter and jelly. You cannot separate them. They just go together.
I'm totally
Can I just add one other thing?
You like peanut butter and jelly?
I do. I love peanut butter and jelly. I think the other thing that is absolutely critically important is that predominantly in cities, it's low-income housing areas or sections of the city that have the smallest amount of park space. And so it's even more critically important that that green space is provided for in low-income areas of the city, so they have access to the same level and quality of parks that anyone else in the city has as well.
I'm told we have time for one more question. Yes, please.
My name is Kate, and I'm a current parkie. My favorite park is Riverside Park as well. It's where I ran my fastest 5Ks. I homage to that park. My question is kind of a two-part question on your staffing. If your neighborhood parks are staffed by the staff in your recreation centers, and if your big central parks are staffed by other staff members, and if you see a difference in those parks in programming and in maintenance and upkeep.
That's a great question. In Philly, our parks are unstaffed. So we have about 120 neighborhood parks that do not have permanent staff to program them. And they are staffed very much so through Friends of groups, right? And we have a very robust network of neighborhood park friends groups, about 109 groups registered, who are, they're not just the stewards of the park and the volunteers of the park, but they are the ones who are helping to manage the seasonal maintenance people in the parks as well. So it's an incredibly important collaboration and partnership that we have with those friends groups, and we cherish them, because they are a critical part of our team. That said, in the short time that I've been in the department, I've been really struck by this idea of where our staffing is and why it is where it is, right? And when you look at our system, you see that our programming staff, so where we have people running programs and engaging people, right, it exists in facilities. And if you ask our HR department for a vacancy list, right, they will give you a list of facilities with the staff who are missing from those facilities. And for some reason, we are staffing those facilities the same way we've been staffing them since they were built in 1954. And for some reason, in the 3 parks surrounding the facilities, they go unstaffed and therefore unprogrammed and unactivated. And so we're really thinking about, and we're doing a strategic planning process over the next 9 months, and we're really thinking about this shift from staffing facilities to staffing neighborhoods, and really thinking more about, how we better staff communities, and identifying sections of our system where there is a parks and recreation desert in terms of programming, just like a food desert. If there's not a recreation facility in your neighborhood, right, then you don't have an after-school program, you don't get free meals, there's no Zumba, but there might be if the Friends of group is running programming, right, but we don't have that presence. So we're really seriously thinking about that, and I think, it will really be a critical part of our planning process moving forward. So thank you for the question.
I agree. I think it's a great question. And just to give you some perspective in terms of the history of recreation programming in parks, in the 1960s, when there weren't facilities, it was very typical that park systems had what were called playground programs or outdoor supervision. And that, happened when I was a kid up until the 70s. And as kids became more programmed. Parents don't send their kids today as commonly just to go to the park and spend the day and come home. Parents don't do that today. So what also happened is as the shift in how kids were spending their time changed, those playground programs went away across the United States and park system. What I can tell you is what's happening in Minneapolis is we're actually putting those back in place as we're seeing more and more kids where we don't have rec centers, but we need to have outdoor supervision and programming. We're actually, the last 2 years in our budget cycle each year, we've added more and more staff so that we actually are putting back, we're not calling them a playground program anymore, but in essence, recreating those kinds of programs in parks that don't have a recreation center.
I think we're going to squeeze in one more question. All the way in the back, sir.
Thanks very much. I was recently at a park that probably all of you know called Lovell Park in southwest Chicago. It was that Superfund site that was cleared about 3 or 4 years ago. And a park has been placed on this about 22-acre park. What was interesting to me there was that the people who organized that park is Community Development Park, working with the Chicago Park District. We're talking about the way in which the park had functioned as a kind of safe space for the neighborhood, which is an area that's poor and has a lot of gang activity. What I'm very curious about, though, and I've never really heard, you're talking about data, heard explained, or whether it's been studied much, is the actual relationship between parks and crime and safety. I think there's a lot of presumption among people who don't think about this a lot that parks are not necessarily safe spaces. I think you probably would say, and my inclination would be that parks are probably safe places, which add to safety. But I haven't read a great deal about the relationship between safety and parks and crime. And I wonder whether you know about this, studied it, whether it's part of the arguments about equity.
I don't know about the study, but I can tell you Minneapolis, we own 15% of the land mass in Minneapolis is parkland, and we have less than 2% of the crime in our parks. We also, with this capital funding that we've gotten, we have actually developed an equity-based criteria matrix to rate every single park in our system, looking at community characteristics and park characteristics. And the community characteristics, what we look at are racially concentrated areas of poverty, the density of the neighborhood, the crime in the neighborhood, and we've got some other factors that we look at, but we actually apply a weighted scale system to it in how we're going to invest in our parks, so that crime is a factor we look at, so that if crime in that neighborhood is high, they get a higher point score, so that we make investments in the most racially and economically challenged areas of the city first, so that we build parks based on those kinds of statistics.
Commissioner Silver?
Similar to Minneapolis, our park system represents 14% of the city's land area, and less than 1% of all crime occurs in those parks. Now, this is a dramatic drop. I grew up here in New York City from the 70s and 80s. That's a dramatic change. You're right. there's very little report or evidence if there's a correlation, but it's also the quality of that park. I know when we transform a park and renovate it, a lot of people are concerned. We lower the fence height, new play equipment, new furnishings. People are concerned it's going to be vandalized, and that's really not the case. I think if we show that we care, people respond. If there are high fences and lack of amenities, then people say you don't care, and I think they behave accordingly. But as I travel to many parks throughout the city, I see them generally would care for and people behaving in those parks, that a number bears that out. But you're right, there is no report, but I can tell you that these are the outdoor living rooms, the play spaces where people can go to connect, and they do want to have those safe spaces where they can enjoy themselves and get off the street. So while it's anecdotal, I'm just saying, based upon my observation, a well cared for park speak volumes to the people who use the park. They're better cared for, and our overall numbers are showing we have very, very little crime in our New York City park system.
We have one case study in particular in Philly. The whole rebuild initiative, which I talked about, is actually being modeled on a park renovation that I was personally involved with at my work at the Fairmount Park Conservancy. It's called Hunting Park, and it's the heart of North Philadelphia. It's probably one of the toughest neighborhoods in the city. And when the Conservancy first started working at Hunting Park in 2009, it was, a very typical park that had fallen on rough times, really disinvested, but also, just sort of a hub of prostitution and sort of an open drug market. And over the course of the next 5 years, we invested about $5 million into the park, but we also spent just as much time and resource in building leadership capacity in the community and developing from the 5 neighborhoods that surround the park where there was no existing friends group, developing a very robust stewardship group that really became not just the eyes and ears in the park, but became a very robust community organization that to this day helps to manage the transformation that we did at Hunting Park. But when we started the Hunting Park project, we were just looking to do a park transformation. The park was awful. There were terrible things happening there, and we wanted to invest a lot of money and to make it magnificent for this community. We had a graduate student who came to us at the end of the project, had seen a report on NBC Nightly News about Hunting Park, and said, we had a lot of celebrities involved, Billie Jean King, Ryan Howard, Michael Vick, and she heard about this park and said, I want to do my senior study on this. And so she looked at crime data for the half-a-mile radius around the block in 2009. And she pulled the crime data, 7 different types of violent crime. And then she pulled the same, and we walked her around the park, we showed her where we made the investments, we introduced her to community members, and then she pulled the same data from in 2013 when we were done the renovations. And what we saw, and we have a heat map that demonstrates this, was that in the 5 years after we made the $5 million of renovations, there was an 89% drop in those crimes, with not just in the park, but within a half-a-mile radius of the park. Now, I'm not saying that crime disappeared from Philadelphia. I have no doubt that crime was displaced and moved to other communities. But when we changed the park and pushed out the negative activity and pushed in the positive activity, it made a difference, not just in that environment, but in the community that surrounded it.
I did want to add a point because we have over 500 active projects here in New York City, and when we're designing parks, I know this is a tendency of planning for what we don't want to see and not what we do want to see. So we design these defensible spaces. We don't want this to happen, let's plan for that. We don't want that to happen, let's put up the tall fences. We don't want these individuals coming to the park, let's plan against it. Rather than planning for what you do want to see, to be inviting and vibrant, because people will respond accordingly. As Kathryn just said, good uses push out bad uses. It's the case of what happened in Bryant Park, and we see that happening more and more. As we improve the sight lines, we activate those spaces, we get friends group, we show the true love and care these park spaces need, we see the public responding accordingly. I just don't want to go around and build park green prisons around the city. We want them to be open, inviting, accessible for all ages. We want our seniors to age gracefully, have places that they can enjoy the parks, but we want to plan for what we do want to see, not plan against or what we don't want to see. And to me, that's the ingredient of having a successful park.
Thank you. So before we conclude tonight, I think you heard a lot about innovation. We talked about safety, planning, programming, public realm. And if this doesn't leave you with the impression or just with the statement that parks are as necessary infrastructure to cities as sewers and roads and schools, I don't know what else is. And I will say this, parks are a city's soul. Fundamentally, that's what it is. It creates neighborhoods that have soul. And I want to thank each and every one of you for keeping the soul alive in your cities. Thank you, Commissioner Silver, for hosting this tonight. A special thank you to the team at the Arsenal. Every chair that's put up, every refreshment, every flyer, it's a lot of work. I hope that you get to know us at New Yorkers for Parks. Come to our Borough by Borough series. There's more on our website about that. Support your local parks, support New York City parks, and now you have 3 destinations to travel to. Thank you all. Have a great night.